Belgium is trying to stop criminal gangs from turning the country into an export hub for illegal narcotics. The recently appointed drugs commissioner told Bloomberg that criminals are manufacturing synthetic drugs in Belgium and then exporting them around the world. For more on this, we are joined by Bloomberg's Max Ramsay, who's in Brussels and wrote a story on the Bloomberg Now. So, Max, talk us through this problem and really how detrimental this could be for Europe.
Well, look, of course, the issue of drug trafficking is not a new one. I mean, this is an issue that Europe has been facing, that the world has been facing for a long time. But what's been particularly concerning, challenging to authorities here is the issue of production within Europe. So this is criminal gangs making synthetic drugs within the continent. Synthetic drugs would include things like ecstasy pills, but also amphetamines, methamphetamines. These are then consumed within Europe, but also even exported out of the continent. So this is a particular challenge because it's very hard within the EU for authorities to tackle this. There is no customs, of course, within the EU in the internal borders, and much less scanning of goods going out of the EU than there would be of goods coming in. So particularly an issue for authorities to face. They think that it is particularly concentrated here in Belgium, also in the Netherlands. Of course, these have two of the largest ports in Europe, the two largest ports, the port of Rotterdam and the port of Antwerp. So really the policy response that you have in these countries is very important in terms of tackling the issue more broadly.
It's interesting you talk about tackling the issue more broadly. I mean, China, the United States, Latin America are famously unable to tackle this issue. How is the European Union even going to attempt to deal with this?
Well, look, the EU has its drug strategy. It put out a drug roadmap just a couple months ago. So you have actions both on a European level and also on the national level. So on the EU level, I mean, they're particularly looking at ports. This is always an issue that you look at. A lot of drugs coming into Europe are coming through the ports, but they also hope that by stopping the chemicals that are used to make synthetic drugs from getting into Europe, they hope that that can also be a way of trying to bring down the production that is happening here in Europe. But of course, actions on the national level also looking at these chemicals. We spoke to the drugs commissioner of Belgium. She's in charge of coordinating the national fight against drugs, the drug industry, and organized crime related to drugs. And she particularly pointed out chemicals which often come from Asia, including China. The EU also says it's speaking to China to try to restrict access to these chemicals, but they also want to introduce legislation, toughen legislation, so that these chemicals that are used to make synthetic drugs here in Europe are no longer able to be accessed by criminals.